2,800 years ago, a blind poet named Homer wove together two of the most enduring stories in Western civilization, the Iliad and the Odyssey. These epic poems, revered for their profound influence, immortalize the tales of heroes like Odysseus and Achilles, and the ill-fated love of Paris and Helen, their names echoing through the corridors of time. The seeds of conflict, prophecies, beauty, and discord. King Priam and Queen Hecuba ruled Troy, deeply loved and respected by their people. Among their 50 sons and 50 daughters, Prince Hector stood out as Troy's greatest warrior. Before his birth, Queen Hecuba received a chilling prophecy. Her unborn son was destined to bring destruction to Troy. Unable to commit such an act herself, she ordered a shepherd to kill the infant. However, the shepherd, like Hecuba, could not bring himself to harm the helpless child and instead raised Paris in secret, a decision that would forever alter the course of history. Brave and honorable, Hector was second only to Achilles in combat, fiercely devoted to his homeland and family, especially his wife Andromache and sons. Long ago, when monsters still roamed the earth, a mighty kingdom thrived across the sea from the great cities of Athens and Sparta. This was Troy, renowned for its seemingly indestructible walls, said to have been built by the gods themselves. King Priam and Queen Hecuba ruled Troy, deeply loved and respected by their people. Among their 50 sons and 50 daughters, Prince Hector stood out as Troy's greatest warrior. Brave and honorable, Hector was second only to Achilles in combat, fiercely devoted to his homeland and family, especially his wife Andromache and son. Yet, fate often weaves its threads in mysterious ways. Hector's sister Cassandra possessed the gift of prophecy, bestowed upon her by the god Apollo in a bid to win her affection. When she rejected him, Apollo, in a fit of jealous rage, cursed her so that her prophecies would never be believed. Then there was Paris, Hector and Cassandra's younger brother, and instead raised Paris in secret, a decision that would forever alter the course of history. Before his birth, Queen Hecuba received a chilling prophecy. Her unborn son was destined to bring destruction to Troy. Unable to commit such an act herself, she ordered a shepherd to kill the infant. However, the shepherd, like Hecuba, could not bring himself to harm the helpless child, and princes of Greece flocked to Sparta, each hope hand. But Paris's unwitting role in the prophecy was not the sole catalyst for Troy's doom. Across the seas, in the city of Sparta, another pivotal birth occurred. Zeus, enamored with Queen Lyta, transformed himself into a magnificent swan and lay with her. Leda soon bore 2 eggs, from which hatched 2 sons, Castor and Pollux, and 2 daughters, Clytemnestra and Helen, grew to become the most beautiful woman in the world. When suitors from across the land, the greatest warriors, among them were Odysseus of Ithaca, Agamemnon of Mycenae, and Ajax of Salamis. Helen, acutely aware that her choice would inevitably lead to the rejection of powerful men and likely bloodshed, found herself in a precarious position. To prevent conflict, Odysseus of Ithaca proposed an oath. Every suitor must swear to protect Helen's chosen husband. With the threat of violence seemingly averted, Helen chose Prince Menelaus. They married, becoming the king and queen of Sparta. While disappointed, the other suitors peacefully returned home, unaware that their solemn oath intended to prevent violence would ultimately drag them into one of the greatest wars the world had ever seen. High on Mount Olympus, another marriage was celebrated. The water goddess and mother of Achilles and Peleus, king of Heth. All gods and heroes were invited, save for one, Eris, the goddess of discord and strife. Universally disliked for the chaos ended by the snub, Eris decided to attend anyway, bringing with her a gift designed to ignite conflict among the deities. A golden apple inscribed with the simple phrase. She tossed the apple among the goddesses, knowing their vanity would lead to contention. Immediately, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite began to quarrel, each claiming the apple. Unable to choose, they turned to Zeus, who, unwilling to displease any goddess, passed a judgment to a mortal known for his fair judgment, none other than Prince Paris of Troy, still living in exile as a shepherd. The 3 goddesses approached Paris, each offering a different bribe for his vote. Hera promised to make him king of Europe and Asia. Athena offered unrivaled skill in war, but Aphrodite, knowing the young man's deepest desires, promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, an offer Paris could not refuse. He awarded her the golden apple. Aphrodite then instructed him to travel to Sparta, where she would use her magic to make Queen Helen fall in love with him. Goddess's instructions, Paris journeyed to Sparta and met Helen. As foretold, they fell in love. Paris, with his men, fought through the Spartan guards sent to stop Helen's abduction and boarded his ship, beginning the long voyage back to Troy. Upon his arrival, Paris was recognized by his father, King Priam, who welcomed him with open arms. The entire palace was awed by Helen's beauty, overjoyed at the new princess of Troy. Prince Hector was furious with his brother, warning that his naive and lustful actions would inevitably bring war to Troy's shores. But even harsher were the pronouncements of his sister, Cassandra. Shrieking in despair, she prophesied that Helen's arrival would lead to the very fall of Troy. Yet, cursed by Apollo, Her warnings were dismissed as the ravings of a mad woman, and she was locked deep within. Upon returning to Sparta from a funeral in Crete, Menelaus was informed of Helen's abduction, and that her ship was headed toward Troy. He immediately raised his armies to attack the Trojans, calling upon all of Helen's former suitors to honor their oaths. True to their word, they answered his call, and soon, the greatest warriors from across Greece, the Achaeans, as Homer would call them, began to assemble to reclaim Helen. Menelaus was his brother, Agamemnon, the most powerful Greek king, ruling over Mycene, an ally of Sparta. Agamemnon commanded the greatest wealth and the largest army. Thus, he was chosen to lead Greece's might. Next came the suitors who had pledged their allegiance to defend Menelaus. Odysseus, Nestor, and Diomedes. Diomedes, the youngest of the Achaean kings, ruled the city of Argos, second only to Mycene in power, a favorite of the goddess Athena. Diomedes was a skilled politician renowned for bringing wealth and stability to his people. Nestor, the king of Pylos, was the oldest of the Greek kings, having lived nearly 3 generations thanks to Apollo's blessings, a former Argonaut who had journeyed the world with Hera. Nestor now offered his years of wisdom and experience to Menelaus. The last and most difficult to recruit was Odysseus, king of Ithaca, known as the wisest and most cunning of the Greeks. Despite his great respect and power, he was reluctant to send his men to war. When Agamemnon's envoys arrived to recruit him, Odysseus feigned madness, mumbling and raving while plowing the ground with an ox and a horse. Seeing through his deception, one of the soldiers decided to test his sanity by placing Odysseus's young son in front of the plow. With no choice but to stop, Odysseus picked up his son, proving his sanity all along. He then reluctantly raised his armies to sail for. Joining these powerful kings were Greece's finest warriors, including Achilles and his lifelong friend Patroclus, as well as Ajax the Greater and Ajax the Lesser. Prince of Phthia, Achilles was destined to be the greatest warrior who ever lived, his support guaranteeing victory in any conflict. After his birth, his mother, the water goddess, had taken him to the underworld and submerged him in the river Styx, whose waters granted immortality. However, as she held him by the heel, that spot remained unprotected, making it his only vulnerable place. Achilles was raised by the centaur Chiron, the teacher of Heracles, under whom he learned music, speechcraft, and warfare. While immensely proud of his achievements, Achilles was also cursed with a short temper, a flaw that would often lead him into conflict throughout his life. Achilles was still studying. His mother Thetis learned of a prophecy. Her son was destined to choose one of 2 paths. He could live a long and peaceful life, dying as an old man without fame, or he could live a short, heroic life, dying a glorious death with his story becoming legend. Spread that Greece's greatest warriors were gathering to attack Troy. Thetis did everything in her power to protect her son. She dressed Achilles in female clothing and sent him to Skyros, where he hid among the island's many women. However, her plan took an unexpected turn. Diomedes, sent to recruit Achilles, was accompanied by Odysseus, the wisest and most cunning of the Greeks. Realizing Achilles was hiding on the island, Odysseus devised a clever plan to reveal him. Arriving with presents for the women, he began to hand them out. Among them, a set of armor particularly excited one of the women. Odysseus then sounded a war horn. All the women fled except for one, Achilles, who shed his disguise and quickly donned the armor, ready for battle. Exposed by the cunning plan, Achilles fetched his lifelong friend Patroclus, and the two joined Odysseus and Diomedes on the journey back to Sparta. For 9 long years, the Achaeans relentlessly attacked Troy, with wave after wave failing to breach the city's impenetrable walls. With resources dwindling, Achilles led Greece's armies south, searching for supplies, gold, and women. They first took the island of Lesbos before landing on the shores of Asia Minor, pillaging every town and city they encountered on their way back from the cities of Lynea. The Greeks took many beautiful women as slaves, with Briseis awarded to Achilles and Chryses given to. These 2 women would tragically alter the course of the war. Agamemnon, having taken Chryses as a concubine, fell deeply in love with her. However, her father, a priest of Apollo, was enraged that his daughter had been enslaved. He traveled to Agamemnon's camp, offering the king gold and silver in exchange for his daughter. But Agamemnon refused, taunting the old man by pointing to Chryses, chained by his bed. Apollo, disgusted by the treatment of his priest, sent a plague of arrows upon the Greek armies, refusing to relent until Chryses was returned home. None, with no other choice, reluctantly agreed to let her go, and Odysseus reunited Chryses with her father. But with his concubine gone, Agamemnon sought to satisfy his desires, turning his gaze to Briseis, Achilles' slave girl. If he had to go without his prize, then so too would his greatest warrior. Stealing her from his tent, Agamemnon declared Briseis his own. He was enraged, demanding her return. Agamemnon merely laughed at him, provoking Achilles to draw his sword in frustration. But as he did so, the goddess Athena descended from the heavens, holding his arm in place and warning against such an impulsive act. The goddess's advice, Achilles put down his sword, refusing to serve a king who had treated him with such disrespect. He returned to his tent, and the Greek armies would have to fight on without his assistance. Meanwhile, For a time, the Greeks managed to fight on without Achilles, though the losses on both sides began to take their toll. In an attempt to end the war without further bloodshed, Helen's two lovers, Paris and Menelaus, agreed to a duel, with the victor being declared her true husband. Warriors on each side anxiously observing the two men who would decide the fate of the war. As swords clashed and crowds cheered, a clear victor emerged. Odysseus struck Paris repeatedly until he peered and whisked his feeble body back to his bedchamber, where Helen awaited. But Helen, having witnessed the battle from her window, was unimpressed by the humiliation Paris had suffered, so devastating that her love for him began to wane. Relieved to be alive, Paris clutched Helen's robes, tears in his eyes, happy to be with her once again. Too was embarrassed by his brother's failure. Realizing the war would continue, he went to bid his family farewell. His wife and son cried in his arms. He knew this could be the last time he would ever see. He had no choice, for from Troy's mighty walls, Hector rallied his men, pushing the Greeks all the way back, even on the verge of defeat. With his men dying around him, Achilles refused to join the fight, taking matters into his own hands. His best friend Patroclus put on Achilles' iconic armor before it appeared that Achilles had rejoined the fight, and fear swept through the Trojan forces, who began to flee back to the safety of the city's walls. Seeing his army crumbling, Hector decided to make a final stand, turning to face Patroclus to save as many of his men as possible. Charging towards him with his sword in hand, he delivered one swift blow, striking Patroclus dead. Shocked at the ease with which Greece's finest warrior had been defeated, Hector crouched down to remove Achilles' helmet. But when Patroclus' face was uncovered, he realized he had not defeated Achilles at all. Seeing the death of Patroclus, the Greek armies rushed to claim his body, fighting off the Trojans as they went, bringing him back to their camp. Achilles was distraught when he saw his best friend lying dead before him. Contemplating ending his own life, Achilles could not hold back his anguish, with his mother Thetis coming to comfort him. Seeing her son in such distress, Thetis went to Olympus and retrieved a new set of armor from the forge of Hippolytus, placing it on Achilles. When she returned, the grief Achilles had felt now turned to revenge. With the destruction of Hector and Troy the only things on his mind, though Hector was gone, Troy still stood defiant behind its massive walls. Though still unmatched in battle, had only one weakness: his heel, where his mother Thetis had held him when she dipped him into the Apollo, angry at Achilles for defiling Hector's body, guided the hand of Paris as he loosed a single arrow. The shaft flew straight and true, striking Achilles in his only vulnerable spot, his heel. The great warrior, undefeated in life, collapsed. His death devastated the Greek forces, but it also reignited their desire to end the war once and for all. Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, devised a plan so bold it would echo through the centuries. Knowing that brute force could no longer conquer Troy, he ordered the construction of a massive wooden horse, hollow inside, large enough to hold Greece's best warriors. The Greeks set sail, pretending to retreat in defeat, leaving behind the horse as an offering, a gesture of supposed humility. But within its wooden belly hid the fire of vengeance, waiting for nightfall. The Trojans, believing the war was over and the horse a gift from the gods, pulled it into the city in celebration. That night, while Troy slept in drunken joy, the hidden warriors crept out of the horse and opened the gates. The Greek army, having returned under the cover of darkness, poured into the city. Fires engulfed temples and homes. Screams filled the air, and the city that had withstood 10 years of siege fell in a single and was slaughtered at the altar. Women like Andromache and Hecuba were taken as slaves, and the phase that launched 1,000 ships was reclaimed by men. As dawn rose over the smoldering ruins, only ash and memory remained. The surviving Greek heroes returned home, but few found peace. Agamemnon was murdered by his wife. Odysseus wandered for 10 years through monsters, witches, and gods before he saw Ithaca again. The war that began with desire ended with destruction, and though the city of Troy burned, its legend was born anew in the verses of Homer. The story of the Trojan horse ended in ruin, but the idea it birthed still rides through every strategy, every war, every boardroom. The sharpest weapon is not the sword, but the silence behind the smile. And so, when you are strongest, sometimes the greatest power is to look like you've already lost.